about the safety. Were there any public safety reports done during this period regarding the 8th Avenue corridor?
Mr. Mayor, that's what I was checking with Sergeant Rawlinson. No, they were not.
Were you requested to do any reports?
No.
Do you know any off-the-hand information about response times and, you know, the length of time? We saw that it adds a few seconds to just a regular motorist. Is there any information about what it adds to?
I haven't seen any of, Mr. Mayor, I haven't seen any official data that would indicate response times.
Any feedback from your folks about traveling the 8th Avenue corridor, particularly as it relates to response to emergency calls?
I did see a document from Mr. McAdams and with regards to that, but as far as officers coming to me and I just checked with him, no.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Mr. McAdams, since you're here, I do want, that's a question relevant to my comments before we turn to the general public. What is that document? What do you have?
Mr. Mayor, Jeff McAdams, President of Fraternal Order Police. I provided a clerk a document we call the Fraternal Order Police white paper related to the narrowing of Northwest 8th Avenue. The overhead, please.
Yes, please provide the overhead.
Specifically, back in October, my organization, we had at our regular October board meeting where we have over 500 both active and retired law enforcement officers. We studied this issue. And it's very rare that we come before the commission on any specific item, but we felt it was very important that we do so because there was a component that was significantly left out. And that was the component of, first off, officer and citizen safety as it relates to response time. Quite frequently, law enforcement, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, has to respond via the east-west corridor of Northwest 8th Avenue. Why do we use that corridor versus 34th Street, University Avenue, or Northwest 16th Avenue? It's pretty obvious that the traffic congestion, both pedestrian, bicycle, as well as vehicle traffic, becomes a greater hazard for both the officer and the citizens in that particular area, both on University and Northwest 16th. If you consider the fact from 34th Street up to 22nd, there's very few, I believe there's a total of 2 right or left-hand turns or intersections that will cause a citizen to cross into the path of an emergency vehicle. The second leading cause of officer-involved injuries is automobile accidents, both when they're responding in emergency mode, as well as deaths. And I think that was a component that was unfortunately overlooked in the study, and we wanted to make sure that our voice was heard on this issue. We respond on emergency traffic calls at least 10 to 15 times a day where we have lights and sirens activated. The Northwest 8th Avenue corridor is the safest east to west corridor for us to travel on, and we think that that should be taken into consideration by the Commission on whatever decision they make. In closing, the other issue is response time. We feel we've actually had several incidents during the narrowing where officers have reported a slower response time to emergency calls. And of course, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, slow response time could result in a loss of life if we don't arrive on scene on time.
All right, thank you for that. And I think that's a critical point, and it's a bit unsettling and curious that we, during this length of this period, we did not seek, there was no effort to find out what it's doing to response times. That seems to be for everyone who's saying safety, 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 that certainly seems to be a pretty important question to know. So, which would also, again, speak to reversing the friendly amendment to move it back to its original configuration during this period in which the pavement's not going to be improved anyway. You know, why not do this? Because I would say, you know, I was going through the October 15th, our meeting, folks, October 15th, 2013, not just a few months ago. And Commissioner Bottcher, you made some very important points about response time when it came to the location of the fire station downtown. You said that you wanted to make sure the location was based so that response times would not be compromised. You said that's, in your mind, the first and foremost point to consider when deciding these matters. You referenced your career as an insurance underwriter, and you said if your response times are 30 seconds or 2.5 minutes or whatever, you're not getting to that person having a heart attack fast enough, or that person in a burning building. Every second counts, quote, end quote. Every second counts. So we're making this decision. We know it does delay by just a few seconds regular folks driving their vehicles here, but we didn't get any data, none, as to what's doing to emergency vehicles. That, I think, is a critical oversight by us for not putting that information out there. And certainly during this interim period, until we can get that data, we should go with what we think is the safest option or the best option to ensure that public safety is considered first and foremost, because again, the data do not support the claim that this 2-lane configuration is safer than the 4-lane configuration. There is the issue of speed. I would submit for our citizens as well as our commissioners who've referenced the speed issue, that you really cannot find much comfort dropping an average speed from 55 to 49, especially since the original speed limit was 45 and now it's 35. If no one's going to argue credibly that yes, we've dropped it to 49 miles per hour, that proves it's safer. If you're a pedestrian, if you're a bicyclist in a bike lane, I would argue that whether you're hit at 49 or 55, it is going to be equally catastrophic. There's very little difference. So the question really has to, I think, get back to the enforcement of speed by those trained to do that, not the configuration of a road. We mentioned the merge points. Again, so we've thinned out the merge points at the base of the hill only to shift them closer to a park and closer to a school. Because the videos that were run were not very reassuring. And again, this gets to where it's all just our opinion. We see art differently. We see things differently. I saw nothing reassuring about cars jockeying for position and cutting in front of one another and going outside. That U-Haul truck goes outside the lane, in the 4-lane area because they're all trying to rush to get ahead of the 2-laning. And where they're doing it now is by a school and by a park. So again, that in no way speaks to enhanced safety. It speaks to diminished safety. And then I also have to speak as a parent, since several of us have done that. And there's absolutely no way on earth I would encourage my child, if a sidewalk was available, to, actually, why don't you pedal your bike next to 4,000-pound vehicles clipping along at 49 miles per hour? DCF would be informed, so it just doesn't make much sense to pursue that. So I'm looking this over, and again, proportionality does matter. 98.3% versus 1.0% versus 0.7%. Now, just as I think Commissioner Bottcher has sort of caricatured the argument against lane reductions by saying, well, however she said it, I'm not going to do the same and caricature those in favor of it. I'm going to say that there should be a win-win-win. The goal of public policy, the goal of us working together, is to have a win-win-win. I'm going to ask staff if they can put up the slides that I submitted, which are the very last in their mod PIX 201311205. Because I think the real question, if we were genuinely pursuing a spirit of collaboration, would be: is there a way to to keep it as it is for the 98.3% who prefer this, but also enhance the other modes, because we want the other modes accommodated as well? Commissioner Poe read the comprehensive plan. Yes, it talks about enhancing modes. I wrote down a phrase that he mentioned about using trails, a path and a trail, and all of that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be in the road. I guess we're not going to be able to get mod pics from the staff presentation. Just because I think it's important to see what it would look like. If we're interested in working together, what it would look like to try and strive for a win-win-win. Now, I do understand the Commissioner Chase referenced the extremes on either side. Someone asphalt only. Frankly, there are some people in the community who, no matter what, want to take lanes off the road for cars, period. That's a viewpoint of some. I'd like to think it's a minority, and I'd certainly like to think it's not represented on this dais. So the question becomes, before we reduce lanes for automobile travel, in order to enhance other modes, the question should be, can we enhance the other modes first before we look into reducing lane capacity? I guess we're not going to see that, so I'll go on to some of my other comments and then I'll sum up so we can get citizen comment. I know some of our citizens really want to address this matter. Again, I think one of the questions I had related to, one of the things I thought was interesting is, I'll mention the idea of a survey. We are interested in what the public thinks. And there was sort of a controlled period during which staff received feedback. And since then the information became overwhelmingly against the lane reductions, and so then at the last minute we got this MoveOn.org petition in which everyone's now saying, oh no, we really want to have two. Now that's not to diminish people who sign up for that. That's just as legitimate as anything. But I think what the point that's clearly made is that public input matters, and we're not doing a really good job of figuring out exactly what the public thinks. And there is a way to do that. Just as we're going to spend money on rumble strips and we're willing to spend money on all that, we can commission a scientifically valid survey, get an independent group to commission a survey that simply asks questions of people. And then this gets to the question, I have one of you, I think maybe it's Commissioner Henson-Rawls mentioned about the people in that area. We could tease it out by people who live in the area, people who live in the metropolitan area, people who live outside the city but drive into the city. And we can ask these questions. Okay, here's what I wanted to show. I went to Rzeszów, Poland as part of the Sister Cities trip initiative. And when I was there, I just was fascinated that this is what they do. And it doesn't say we have to do it that way, but I know Commissioner Wells, you went overseas and you came back and said, this is something we should look at. This is what we should look at. And you can also now show the next slide. That's a shared path, bike and pedestrian path. Oh, that's not it. There's another picture that shows
just scroll down.
the markings. Yeah, and that shows the markings very clearly delineated. And guess what? People do that. And so, and this is a city that,
like a sidewalk?
yeah. They expanded the sidewalk. I think it's 10 feet, and it's a shared path. It's clearly marked, and everywhere you go over there, you see people staying in their lanes. Okay, they stay in their lanes. And look, there's grass between the sidewalk or the shared path and the road. And I can tell you, they will look at you like you're crazy if you say you have the option to move both pedestrians and bicyclists away from motorized vehicles, but you choose to put them there anyway. They say if you have the choice, there's no way you would put them closer to cars, whether they're going 55 miles per hour, 49 miles per hour, or 20 miles per hour. This is a superior approach. So the real question is, during this interim period, can we examine that and see if we can possibly do something like that on both sides and thus preserve the lane capacity on the roads for the 98.3% who want to travel that way? And I would add that this isn't just one place. I started doing a little digging, and sure enough, Federal Highway Administration, this is considered a best practice design, best practices consistent with building shared paths. And if you look around the country and around the world, again, moving to shared paths for non-motorized transport, whether it's on bicycle or by foot, is considered safer and better than moving anybody closer to a motorized vehicle. And so that should be the real question, is can we do that? Now, we may do the engineering and come back and says, nope, there's just no way we can move either sidewalk, make any changes to either sidewalk on either side. This is what we're left with. And then at that point we say, okay, now we'll make the decision whether to remove lane capacity for cars in order to enhance the others, or we leave it as is. Okay, but we're not there yet because I was shocked. The trial was approved before I was sworn into office, and I was a bit surprised to hear that during this time we didn't seek response time data from police or fire, and we didn't look to what we might be able to do to have what I would call a win-win-win. It's a win for the automobiles, it's a win for the bicyclists, and it's a win for the pedestrians. And that's the direction I would think we should try to go in. So I'll pause. We've lit some more lights up, and we certainly do want to get to citizen comment. Commissioner Chase.
Old light.
Old light. Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had two questions for Ms. Scott. And one I'll ask while you're approaching the lectern. Can we, you mentioned putting black paint on top of the stripes. Can we grind those? I don't know that it matters, but
It makes it white looking.
but I was wondering.
Mr. Mann says we could grind them, but it makes the aggregate shine more at night.
Okay, that's fascinating. I didn't know that. Anyway, I was curious. The other is, I know we costed, I'll call it the Hudson option. Mr. Hudson suggested something very similar to what the mayor just noted, that we do an additional. I mean, we can't. I don't know if we could fill the wetland, but we costed doing a wooden structure that would be sort of an off-street bike facility on the north. Do you recall what the price increment was for that over either the status quo or the proposal we're currently considering? Because that is an option we explored. It'd be important to know, to recall what the dollar figure was. And if I don't, my recollection is that we rejected it because of cost.
We do that.
It was B.
We did look at a lot of different options and provided cost at the workshop that was conducted in October of last year. And Ryan's trying to find that specific information here.
See, it's separate. It's the difference between this and that.
The 8-foot elevated boardwalk was a cost of $1.6 million, and then doing 8-foot wide sidewalks would be a cost of $1.1 million.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Bottcher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do want to address, since you singled me out and referenced something that I said at a different meeting on a different topic, when you're talking about citing a fire department, that is an entirely different can of worms than what we're talking about here today. Because by the logic of we need to keep roads as wide as possible to make them as easy as possible for emergency vehicles to transverse, then that logic follows that we should be widening every road and street in town. So I don't think that there's a comparison there.